Hi guys, it's Lindsay. Hello to everybody, old and new. Welcome, it's nice to have you here. I'm going to be showing you from start to finish how I make one of my smaller size junk journals. The size of this is 4.5 wide inches by 6 inches tall. And I've got two pieces of card there at the top. The screen that you can see, it's just cereal box card. You can use any card. The only card I wouldn't recommend would be, say, corrugated card, like an Amazon box or something like that, because it will deform and it will lose its structure over time. So I've used this card stock. It's pretty sturdy. You could use actual book board to make these if you wanted to give it more structure, but I find that this works perfectly fine. So I have these printables that I've done, and I'm going to cover these pieces of card, and I'm going to leave a bit of an overhang so we can fold in the edges to make them nice and neat. So I'm doing the front and back, and I did use the paper over the card beforehand to make sure that none of that image shows through, because the pattern's quite opaque, and especially on the front it's quite a busy pattern. It doesn't show through, it's perfectly fine. If it does show through, if you have card like mine that is heavily patterned underneath your paper, you can cover it with maybe some gesso, maybe double up the paper that you use over the top, so put a layer of white underneath. I did find I've made a couple more journals this way, and I found that I've just needed to colour in the white lettering through, so it doesn't show through the paper that I'm using on top. So there's a couple of quick fixes, easy fixes for you to do if that's a problem in your case. So I'm just folding in the edges so I can see where I need to cut off these corners, and I don't cut them straight, I cut them sort of rounded, so the corners, when they're folded over, they don't overlap, they don't pull up, they don't basically affect each other. So I'm just cutting them here, as you can see, and then we will fold the edges in a moment. So I hope you're all well. I think I say that in every video. I genuinely hope you are, especially with everything that's going on in the world at the minute. So it's nice to just have a bit of a break from it, get away and do something creative and fun and just soothing for the soul. So I'm going to stick down these edges with this glue stick. This works perfectly fine, I find, for this. And you just want to pull them in nice and tight and hold them down to this stick. This glue is pretty good, to be honest, in terms of grabbing and sticking down practically straight away. I mean, you can use any glue. You can use a tacky glue, wet glue. You can use double-sided tape. You could use Fabri-Tac, whatever you've got on hand. You could use for this. There are plenty of options depending on where you are in the world. So that's nice and stuck down. And I shall do the same to the other side. Once you've got your edges stuck down, you want to decide what you want on the inside of your covers. I've gone for another printable, but you can use absolutely anything from book pages to antique papers. I like to use anaglypta wallpaper because I do normally like a bit of texture, but I've just kept it simple with these, and I've gone for a printable that I have, and I'm just going to cut this down to size to cover those edges where we folded them in and make it look nice and seamless. You could, at this point, if you wanted to add a pocket to the inside covers, you could sew the pocket on before gluing them down. I will add pockets, but I'm going to do it later, and I will faux stitch and then I will use Fabri-Tac to secure them down. This works perfectly fine, and that allows me to add my pockets in later and decide where it is that I want the pockets. Any pieces like that I've just chopped off as well, don't throw those away, keep hold of those. I have a little scrap envelope here that I keep all these bits in, because when it comes to embellishing the journal, you'll want little scraps here and there, and you can use those as tags, as labels inside the journal. So just utilise everything. That's the beauty of junk journaling, I think, that you can literally utilise any tiny little bit of scrap. So I'm cutting those just shy of the measurements that I gave at the beginning, which is 4.5 by 6 inches. So I'm cutting them to 4¼ by 5¾ perhaps. That would do the trick. But I didn't really measure it, I'm just cutting it slightly smaller, and you saw me hold the paper up against the book to get a bit of an eyeball as to where I needed to make the cut. So you just want to cut them slightly smaller so there's no sort of lifting at the edge. I'm using this book text, this text block, as a like gluing, somewhere to glue, so I can glue right to the edges, there's no lifting. And I'm going to use my ruler just to squash everything down and make sure it's completely adhered and there's no bubbles or anything underneath that piece. And I'll do the same to the other cover piece as well. Once you've got these all lined up, we're going to start choosing our papers. Now, choosing papers at this point, you would have already thought of perhaps a theme. I don't really have themes. My theme is just vintage and pretty and just what I have to hand. Obviously themed journals have to be thought out prior because you have to collect your ephemera and your bits and pieces for it. So I'm just making a little collection of journals from things I already have to hand. So there's the covers, so we're going to set them aside and we're going to look at the collection of papers that I have. These are just pages, we're not looking for ephemera, we're not looking for anything like that, we're just looking for papers that we can put in there to start the body of the inners of the journal. So I'm looking for different textures, I'm looking for different patterns. So I've got some square paper here, you saw the blue grid paper at the top there, some music paper. These are essentially, they're not all full-size papers, I call them full-size papers. Some of them are slightly smaller, they're not perfect, but they're enough that they count as a page. And then we'll go in and add some more specialty pages. I'm cutting things down to size, and again it's all done by eyeballing, they're not all perfect, they're not all the same size. I'm just sort of using this, you can see here, I'm using this text page, this blue sort of grid page, sorry, as a guideline as to where I need to cut that lined piece down. So it's all completely loose and easy and just fun, there's no pressure. I'm not, you know, being really rigid with the sizes and making sure everything aligns and it's all perfect. I like it when they're a bit askew, so I've got some pieces that are smaller than others so I can layer them up, and later when we come to add in the embellishments, bits of lace and things like that, you'll see that where the pages aren't quite the same size and you see that layering coming through, it will just look really pretty when it's all together. And flicking through the journal at the end will just be lovely. So you want to think about things that have different textures. You don't want too many plain things, but you don't want too many pattern things either. And when I'm assembling my signatures, so each little collection of pages is a signature. So these books will have 3 signatures. So in each signature, I'm going to make sure that I've got a few specialty pages, I've got a couple of pockets, and I've got plenty of plain, and even grid paper and lined paper I would class as plain paper because that's essentially writing paper. If you've got pattern paper, that's the sort of page you would look to put a photo on, or we might even add in some writing spots before we assemble the journal. So this video here is about the cover and it's about assembling the pages together. If you want to hit subscribe and the notification bell, we will be making the actual inners in the next video. So we will be gathering we'll be sewing on some pockets, gathering some ephemera, and just decorating the pages and building the actual content of the journal up to be something that we can assemble, and it'll be ready to use and it will look really, really nice. I've done one, my flip through of my personal journal is what I'm modelling this journal on. So I'm making a replica essentially of the one that I have, and I absolutely love mine, so I'm more than happy to share this with you. I know you're going to love it, so yeah, stay tuned for that. And you can see here I've got some more printables. these are the things as well in the next video that I shall start doing. I shall start adding these bits in, just to give it a bit more life. I mean, I like a very neutral palette. I like my journals to be very muted and neutral and just really plain, because I like to add my deco in later on, depending on the mood that I'm in, when I actually come to using my journal. But obviously these journals are not for me, so I'll appreciate that not everybody wants them to be plain. They want the decoration and things to be done prior, so I will be adding more decoration than I would normally do, so a little out of my comfort zone, but we're working with it. You can see my scrap folder there. Every little piece that I cut off I think I can utilise somewhere, I will save into that folder. So I'm just pulling out some more pages here. I figured I wanted about 10 pages per signature in these journals, to allow room for whoever uses this journal to really bulk it up with photos and tags and journaling cards and all of that fun stuff. So this page is big enough that I can fold it up here, so I'm beginning now to think about pockets and how I can add more interest to each page. And these kind of things some of them will leave plain because they're just nice as they are. Some of them we'll go in and decorate later on, and obviously all the sewing and things we'll be doing in the next video as well, so I'll be showing you some of that, and how I do that, and how simple it is, if you've got a sewing machine of course, how simple it is to add that detail. So you can see here that top there where I've torn it out of the book, I've taken off the loose pieces, but I've left that sort of jagged edge, because again, things like that for me add character. You could cut that off if you prefer, it's completely personal preference. This lined paper is going to be smaller or narrower than the other pages, but I'm quite happy with that because I wanted the lines to be across, so again, whoever uses this journal can actually use those lines to write on. I don't personally mind if the lines are the wrong way, because I would just find a way to use it anyway, but because this piece is going to be narrower and it's long enough to be turned into a pocket, that's exactly what I'm doing. So I'm utilising that spare bit of paper on the bottom there to turn it into a pocket, so it can be multi-purpose. And just a few extra bits of ephemera here that I've pulled out. So this is a printable, some journaling paper, some printed paper. These are some postcards that I found in the antique shop, some random just book paper. It was on botany, I'm not sure. And that ordnance map, which I absolutely love. It's sort of assembled with a fabric, so where I cut it apart, it's actually the fabric that I'm cutting, and each section of this map is the perfect size for this size journal, so it works out lovely. And again, these bits I'm pulling out, but at this point these are kind of irrelevant, so we won't be using these just yet. I just had it floating about and I know that I want to add it into this journal, so I'm putting it with my little cluster so it doesn't get lost or perhaps used in another project. So you can see as I'm cutting it out that it's really floppy. That's because it's a fabric that's holding this map together, so that's what I'm cutting here, and it almost acts as a journaling card. I'm actually going to turn this into a page by using some masking tape to assemble it alongside my journaling paper. That is actually lined paper. That's actually out of my journal, my personal journal that I write in. I call it my thoughts and feelings journal. But I like the paper, and it's like a creamy off-white colour. It's from Paper Chase, so I'm just using a piece of that and assembling it with the masking tape. I leave a small gap, and then I fold the tape down over to seal it, and then I shall crease it, and it will just be sewn in with the rest of the pages. So I'm going to make sure that that is well adhered and the tape is nicely stuck down. The page folds nicely because the tape adds a bit of stiffness to the spine. So you just want to make sure that you manipulate it a bit so it folds nicely. So I'm going to start assembling the signatures. There are going to be 3 signatures. and I'm going to make sure they are around 10 pages per signature to start with. And by pages I mean those pocket pieces, I mean the patterns, I mean the different sizes, all of the little collection of papers that we've put together so far in this journal. I'm going to make sure there's a nice selection, so I'm going to make sure that they're evenly distributed as well, so there's not like 2 pockets in a row, and there's not going to be like too many patterns together, because a pattern page essentially is something that you would maybe stick a photo on or add something to, and then obviously the plainer pages and the grid paper and the line paper and those sorts of pages are ones that you can write on. So this is just, I think I've said it already, this is just the bare bones of a journal, and this is just giving us a basis to start from. The next video coming up will be embellishing the pages, so adding some pockets, sewing down some flaps to create little tuck spots, and all that fun stuff. And then a video following that will be making some tags and ephemera and bits, like little sort of free embellishments. I say free because they're not going to be sewn in or stuck into the book, they're just going to be sort of additional pieces that we put into the book, that can be moved around or what have you a bit later on. So that's going to be the last thing that I do for this one, which is, as I say, assembling the signatures. One thing I will do is take off this line of black stitching on this pocket piece that I made for a previous journal but I didn't use, and as I'm going to be using white stitching in this journal, I'm going to add a layer of, or a line, sorry, of white stitching, and cut that black line off. Now I do love contrast stitching, and I would strongly advise it. Black or brown perhaps would look lovely, and it really highlights the sort of stitched detail. But I have so much white thread, it's silly, and getting hold of more thread is being a bit tricky at the minute, unless you go on Amazon and buy a massive stack of all the different colours, which I don't need. So I'm going to use white because that's what I have tons of, and I don't want to run out halfway through making the book. So I'm taking that black line off, and just so it will be cohesive. I could have just left that in, but I like mine to be cohesive and match all the way through. So for me it makes sense that I take it off. It just makes me feel better about the book coming together as a whole piece. And it looks like that piece was created for this book as opposed to just being a random piece that I pulled out, even though it was. So that's it. I hope you've enjoyed watching this, and I hope you stay tuned for the next part of this mini series. I will speak to you again very, very soon. Bye for now.